Hi, everybody. Here is your third ethics chat, and this is for week 5, which is the week going into midterms. So you've got your midterms in week 6, and I will be holding a separate midterm study session Friday at 4 p.m. It will be via Zoom, so if you want to participate face to face, that's awesome. If not, I will record it and I will make sure that everybody gets a chance to look at it before the midterm. So we had 2 chapters this week. The first one was all about healthy workplace environments. That was chapter 12. And basically, the chapter deals with a lot of bullying and kind of nurse to nurse bullying and some patient to nurse violence. Um, this is actually a really big and pertinent problem in all hospitals right now or in all facilities. And really, honestly, it is not just a nursing thing. I can tell you that everywhere that I've worked, there is kind of that workplace bullying incivility where they just kind of roll their eyes and treat you like less than. So, in order to do well on the homework slash parts of the midterm, this is what you need to know. You need to know the other words for nurse to nurse bullying. So that's called horizontal bullying or lateral bullying. You need to know that incivility means essentially rude behavior and that it is far more common from females to females. That's not to say that males never bully or, are rude, but, women can be very catty to each other. And studies have shown that the majority of workplace incivility is female to female. Um, in order for incivility to be classified as bullying, you need 2 things. One is a pattern or um, some sort of a long-term presence. The next is power issues. So if it's like somebody that is higher up than you, and honestly, what you will probably run into and what happens the most is somebody that's been there longer than you, so they've got that seniority thing, and you come in as a new person and obviously you don't know as much or know where things are or have different ideas about things that could be better, but they will always feel threatened and things like that. Um, we need to know why workplace violence is often misunderstood. The reason behind that is that there is a lack of a similar definition. So, what is workplace violence to one institution could be classified as harassment to another. So then there's no correlation that they can, like, there can't be a nationwide anti-bullying in the workplace kind of thing because not everybody calls it bullying. So that's the big reason that it is misunderstood. Um, you will need to know about the OSH Act of 1970, and that's on page 171 in your textbook. You'll need to know the General Duty Clause and what that represents. Um, and then it talks about important things in Section 5 of the OSH Act and in Section 11. So that's all there on page 171. You just need to read through that, make sure you understand it. You will need to know types of violence, and that is in one of the little charts on page 172. It's box 12.1. So that'll tell you the types of violence that are prevalent in the workplace. You will also need to know about nonviolent bullying, which is also on the same page in another box. Patient to nurse violence, which is on page 173. There's a nice list for you. You will need to know about what the World Health Organization feels about it, and that's on page 176. And then you will need to know consequences for kind of any of that workplace bullying, and that's on pages 176 and 177. So that was chapter 12. Chapter 16 deals with whistleblowing, which truly is an ethical dilemma, and everybody's going to deal with it differently. However, um, I I personally look at whistleblowing as a good thing and a very necessary thing. Um, so this chapter was kind of a big deal to me. So in this chapter, things you will need to know is uh, internal whistleblowing and external whistleblowing, and how the internal turns into the external whistleblowing. You'll need to know the definition of groupthink, and that's on page 231. And basically, groupthink is the biggest obstacle to whistleblowing itself. So, right now in the nation, there is a ton of groupthink going on. Um, and a lot of times, I mean, you'll get conspiracy theorists and all sorts of things from this groupthink. But that's what makes it hardest for the whistleblower to come forward with facts. All right. Whistleblowing needs to go through all of the internal channels first before you even think about taking it to the news media or anything like that. And the only exception to that is that if it is a matter of life and death, um, that you immediately go to the outside, the external forces with the whistleblowing. That's the only exception for not following the proper channels. You'll find that on page 234. And then another important thing that they're going to talk about on page 234 is all about advocacy. So advocating for your patients, advocating for your coworkers, and why that's important. There are guidelines for whistleblowing on page 235 and box 16.1. So really look at your charts, you guys. That's where the great information is, and it's usually in bullet points, so it's super easy to remember and understand. You will need to know the cultural issues that involve whistleblowing. You know, for example, an Asian woman has been culturally taught that men are in charge and you have to listen to what the man says and things like that. So, cultural issues, you'll need to read about that and know all about that. The risks of whistleblowing, and that's on pages 235 to 237. That's a long section. Um, and then this is where it gets tricky. You will need to know several of these laws and bills surrounding keeping the whistleblower safe. So, you will need to read about the ANA, which is the Nursing Association, their code of ethics, which they have one, and it's on page 237. You'll need to know that the First and 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution allows rights to whistleblowers by not allowing retaliation. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, that's on page 237 as well. And it and the Fair Labor Standards Act both protect individuals from workplace mistreatment in retaliation to whistleblowing. You will need to know the Office of Accountability and Whistleblowing Protection Act. So that's the OAWP. It's on page 238. And it is tied into the Veterans Association. You will need to know the False Claims Act, also on page 238. And the False Claims Act is for problems and issues that are against a government entity. So if it's against a federal bank, or if it's against a mayor or a city or anything like that, that's where the False Claims Act comes in. And it seems like it probably wouldn't affect hospitals and nursing areas, but it actually does. If you read that, you'll see kind of how it ties in. Whistleblowing Protection Act of 1989, that's on page 239. And that also talks about then the newer version, which is the Whistleblowing Protection Enhancement Act of 2007. You will need to know the National Labor Relations Act, and you will need to know the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So that's OSHA, which I'm sure you guys have heard of OSHA and kind of know the situation there. They talk about that also on page 239. One thing that will be on the test and the midterm as well is the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002. You will need to know who that act protects. Because there are some acts that protect the whistleblower. There are some that protect the company. There are some that protect future employees. There are some, I mean, it's all different. So just make sure that you understand and maybe use index cards to separate which act and what it does. And just be thankful you don't have to read the entire act in its entirety. So congrats, I guess. Okay, so that's it for this week, ethics. And again, Friday, we will be having a midterm study session. There is a midterm study guide posted. Please feel free to take notes on that. You can use that on the test. All right, and I will see you next week.